Obviously, you'll come back and watch it in detail, but live and in person on Friday, what are you looking at?
I think just, a lot of how different guys, especially the new guys, how they handle the sidelines and just kind of some game management stuff with the quarterback and really just, I'll probably stay on the sidelines, I think, and just kind of seeing how guys interact with the coaches and, just handling the game time environment, which they haven't had, So I think it's really the young guys more than anything.
What do you value there as far as the, interactions and stuff? I guess what are you looking for in that?
Well, obviously it's a different pressure situation than it is out there in practice or even in family nights. So I think it's just, can they stay calm in the moment? Can they focus on the task at hand? Stay true to their fundamentals and their techniques. Because sometimes, obviously, when those lights come on and the crowd's there, it just becomes different.
Aaron was saying yesterday the expectation for a quarterback in the preseason is to play well because it's vanilla defense. So what does playing well mean for Jordan?
Well, I think it's a little. Every preseason game is a little bit different, but I think you got to move the ball. Certainly you would like to score, and but I think just be productive. With the opportunities you're given. Every play there's going to be different opportunities, and just making the right decisions, getting in and out of the huddle, but making plays when they're there to be made.
Brian, where have you seen Jordan's biggest improvement this summer, or however many days we've been?
Yeah, I think he's really stacked days, and I think you're starting to see a little bit more consistency. I think you always saw the flashes. I think you're seeing the more consistent day-to-day decision-making, confidence and letting it loose when he sees it, and not hesitating or maybe thinking twice. I know Matt's talked a lot about just kind of, things are slowing down for him a little bit. But one of the things I've seen is when he recognizes it, trusting it, and then just really kind of being more violent with his throws and just more intent with what he's doing.
Brian, you had a number of specialists and get worked out. Is that just emergency list building, or are you looking to make a move there?
A little bit of both. I think we kind of wanted to, we always are trying to make sure guys are in shape where they're at, for our emergency list and whatnot. But at the same time, I think we're, as we get into these, we got a game Friday night, 2 really intense practices, and then another game. So we also have to cut to 85 on Tuesday. So, the numbers game is going to come into play here pretty quick. So just making sure we're on top of things there.
Speaking of that, when it comes to roster building, specifically like the wide receiver core in particular, how do you balance keeping the 53 most deserving versus what a unit might be?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think as this year we're going to have 16 practice squad players as well. There's going to be an ability for those players to be elevated more than there were in the last couple of years. So, we've talked a lot about it as we've gone into this camp about just trying to keep the 53 best players, not just certain numbers at positions, because I think the ability to elevate practice squad players maybe allows you a little bit more flexibility than it has in the past, where you say, hey, I have to have this number at every position. Maybe that's not the case as much anymore. Maybe we're going to be able to kind of be a little bit more flexible with our numbers, whether they're on the 53 or the 16.
Just talk about that over the last couple of years, Brian. You've had so much more flexibility with IR, practice squad numbers. You really got a 69-man team, don't you, now, over the last couple of years?
I think that's a pretty good way to look at it. I think, obviously, between the 53, the 69, and then the 48 guys that dress on game day, I think you have to look at it a lot of different ways. And obviously, the 48 guys that walk out there on the field every Sunday, that's the most important. But as you know, it's a long season with injuries and trying to manage that. I think the more flexibility we have, and this year with the 16 practice squad players, the ability for those guys to come up 3 times, and then we're still going to have some room with the return to play IR guys, which we have eight of those. So it's not as flexible as it was with COVID, which we would love to keep that, as personnel guys, but there's much more flexibility than there has been in the past. And I think as we build that out, I think it's really good for the players too, because now veteran players have another opportunity to stay in the game and keep playing, where maybe before they didn't.
Brian, I know every team's in the same boat. You look at, you have a shorter training camp now. You're down to 3 preseason games instead of 4. There's this big ramp up before you can even put the pads on. The practice times, are limited. Does it feel like just more and more of a squeeze in terms of being able to get the type of evaluation you want on players, or how do you look at it?
Yeah, I do think that there's much less. There's not 4 preseason games anymore. There's no more 2-a-day practices, and you really weren't able to kind of I think in the past, we were able to get through that grind period earlier, and so to where the guys got maybe a little bit more in their comfort zone. But I think Matt does a really good job, intentionally of kind of as we approach these games, kind of like putting guys in positions to see what we need to see. But it's not, there's not as many opportunities as we've had in the past.
Brian, at offensive tackle, you've hit some really good veteran guys with Veldier and Wagner and Kelly last year. Is that a spot that you might be looking for, regardless of what Dave's status is, but you just don't have a lot of depth there presently?
Yeah, we're always looking. We're always going to kind of kick the tires as we go through the preseason and we get down to that 53 cut. There's obviously big opportunity there as guys are making their roster. But we do have, 2 significant players, that haven't been out there that we'll be coming back to, which I think as we've gone the past few years, it hasn't been like that. Like when we went out and got somebody, we didn't have guys coming off the shelf of that caliber. So we'll, if there's opportunities out there that we think we can help us, we're certainly gonna look at that, but nothing imminent.
Monday's practice with the first team offense in front of Aaron on offensive line. There's 2 guys that had 16 starts so far in their careers. Can you think of if that's the group that goes week 1, is that maybe the youngest offensive line you've had in your time here?
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look at that. I'm not sure. I know we have a lot of confidence in those guys, and I think they are young players, but those guys have had pretty significant game experience. Yash and Running and Newman, and Josh got a lot of work last year as a rookie. I like the depth of our group, and certainly getting those 2 All-Pro guys comes back certainly changes things a little bit, and I'm confident those guys will get there. But even without those guys, I really like how the guys are working. They got a tough test every day with the group they're going against, and that's only going to make them better as we head into this season.
We always talk about the difference between being in shape and football shape. For a guy like Dave, who's played a lot of football in his career, but not recently, at what point in camp do you need to see him get back to being football shape enough to be ready for week 1?
I think when the timing's right, he'll get there. I think with a guy that has as much experience as Dave, that time will be much shorter than I think other guys. But there's no doubt when you haven't played as long as he has, there's going to be a period of time where he's going to have to develop that callus and kind of get back into that elite level play that he has always been used to. So. He's a unique athlete, and I know he'll get up to speed quickly once he gets out there. But we'd love to have him out there now. But I think there's risk reward on that.
Does that period of time mean that he needs to be back in camp to be ready for week 1? You can't just have him miss all of camp and then be ready in Minnesota.
Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily think that. That would be ideal, but I don't necessarily think that.
Do you anticipate both him and Jenkins starting on the pup, or do you think they'll?
Yeah, we're not no timelines right now. They're both doing really, really well. I think they both have a shot to play early in the season, but we're not gonna put any timelines on it. If we get down to that point where we think that's the best thing for the football team to keep them on pup, we will. But they're progressing very well.
Can you confirm Dexter's return and why he made the move just to get another couple legs in here?
Yeah, no. So we brought a bunch of guys in yesterday. Dexter was phenomenal shape and looked really, really good. It was good to see him again. And I think right now with going into these, like I said this week, with 2 games and 2 really intense practices, we needed another running back, kind of with what we're going through. So.
Hey Brian, going back to last year with Tyler Davis, what did you guys like about him when you brought him in, and just what did you think about how he kind of hit the ground running?
Yeah, I think certainly he can run. You guys have seen it out there. He's got really good speed. He was a position, conversion, which that takes time, So we kind of thought, he had been making that conversion for a couple of years, and maybe he was about ready to, and I think at the time we needed a little bit of help at the tight end spot. We had certainly been through that with Bobby. It's hard to be patient sometimes with those kind of guys to get to the other side of it, but I think if you do, he was a quarterback that turned wide receiver, that turned tight end. So smart kid who can really run. He's still very raw in some ways as well at the position, but I think you guys see him kind of consistently making plays, and he's got the kind of speed that I think that defenses have to take notice of.
With some roster cuts coming up, are you planning to have a conversation with Aaron Rodgers?
We kind of communicate, throughout the week all the time. So, I think most of those big conversations would come, I think, more towards the end of camp than right now. But yeah, certainly, I pick his brain a lot on what he's seeing out there. Again, we're very early in camp and we haven't played a preseason game, so this next, 8-9 days here are going to be really important for our football team. And I think after we get through that, we may have a little bit more information as to where we're headed.
Hey, Brian, just one follow-up on Davis. Is there what kind of markers do you look for when you're looking at, whether it was Robert in 17 and making that switch that you can kind of see that, this is a guy that could potentially, complete a spot for the tight end?
Yeah. Your tight end's an interesting position because, they have to understand the entire, almost like a quarterback, the running game, the pass game. So there's a certain level of intelligence you really have to have. You have to be a smart guy to really understand that all. And then I think also just obviously there's athletic, attribute, size and speed and stuff that we're looking for. But there's also, I think, whenever you take guys, whether it's a wide receiver that's coming into tight end or kind of like Robert and Tyler did, it's, quarterback, wide receiver tight. There's a little bit of level of toughness and ability to play physical on the line of scrimmage. That takes time, but there's got to be a willingness to do it as well, So I think those are some of the things we look for. But, I think you've seen throughout this league in a long time, whether it's basketball players, that tight end position, that you get guys from everywhere.
Brian, you've on your offensive line, you've generally liked athletic guys. Caleb Jones probably is the opposite of what you've looked for over the years, but he's an effective guy. I mean, it's like when he gets his hands on the defenders, it's over. I guess what did you see there, and what made you think he'd fit here?
Yeah, obviously he's got rare length, and I think he's one of those guys, for as big as he is, and everyone wants to talk about his size, he's a little bit better foot athlete than I think people give him credit for. We kind of liked his play temperament coming out of college, and you got to give him a lot of credit. He's made the most of his opportunities. He's gotten himself in really good shape, probably the best shape he's been in since high school, and I think he's done a really nice job. So I'm excited for him and among others to get out there Friday night and really kind of have an opportunity to see what they can do.
When it comes to whether or not Aaron is going to play any preseason snaps, do you leave that up to Matt and maybe how Aaron feels, or do you have input on that decision?
I think that's it's really up to Aaron and Matt, and kind of working through that, what's best for the football team. I'm certainly, me and Matt talk all the time about kind of these games and these practices and the opportunities and snaps. But yeah, I think that's one of those decisions that Matt will ultimately make, and I think it's a long season. Everybody gets hyper intense with the beginning of the season, and it's really important. But at the same time, it's a very long season. So I think as we get towards the middle of next week, or those decisions will kind of be made, and just in what's best for our football team. So.
Brian, when was Rich besides the catalyst behind signing Nixon and Levitt? I mean, were those two guys he
was big on both those two guys, yeah, no doubt about it. So he, when we were going through before Rich was here, as we go through our meetings, Nixon was on our radar as a nickel corner. He had done some good things, and so we knew with Shandon leaving and some different things that were going on that we were going to kind of have to be aware and maybe active, looking at some of those nickel guys. And then when Rich came in, obviously, he was very, very high on him as a special teams player, and now we had a good feel for the player, the person. And then Levitt has been one of their best special teams players over there for the last couple of years. So, yeah, he was very influential in kind of those two guys.
I think you signed Rico Gafford before.
Correct.
He came here,
Yep.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So when he looks like he's a big part of special teams.
Yeah, he's doing a really nice job, but man, he goes against everything I've been taught.
So when you were evaluating him, did you evaluate him as an offensive player or defensive player?
Coming out, as a defensive player, and then obviously we saw him. I think we really liked the athlete, and when we got him here, as we started kind of looking at how the team might shake out, and again, it's we don't have a crystal ball, so we have no idea, but we just thought it might be better to move him over. And you talk about a guy that's made a lot of his opportunities. He certainly has, and so. And he's in his limited opportunities in Nashville, like he's been a pretty good teams player as well. So, again, he's there's some mentors of mine that would not be happy from a height perspective, but he's showing the ability to overcome it a little bit. So.
After two more, please. Brian, you mentioned a couple times what you anticipate to be some intense practices with the Saints.
Mm-hmm.
Are you in on those conversations with Matt and the staff and the Saints staff and what you want to get out of those 2 days?
Yeah, I think Matt and the coaches over at the Saints they're talking pretty frequently just to kind of to set those 2 days up so we get the most for both teams out of that. I think anytime you bring another team in to have practice days like this, and you guys have been a part of them, and it's just a different intensity. And I think we're very aware of that as we approach this week and making sure we do the right things for our players and getting them ready. It's a fantastic environment, in my opinion, from not only evaluation purposes for our football team, but also the ability to control some of those the environments to protect our guys, unlike a preseason game. So I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be really good for us. But it does put a lot of load and wear on your team because it's much different than just a normal practice.
And this game Friday night, they're almost become a common opponent, a good football team, and you're on the road. That's a pretty good test that you can ask for to evaluate your young guys.
Absolutely, and I think and those are so important. I mean, the difference between what you do out there in that practice field and then when the lights come on and there's no coach right behind you telling you what's coming and being able to communicate and then perform at the same time. I mean, that's what this game is, and the guys that make it in this league and play a long time at a high level, they're able to handle that environment and those atmospheres. So this will be the first and best test for us to really see how these guys, and then whether they have good performances or bad performances, it's what they learn from that and how they carry it over to the 2 practices and the next game. So you guys know, I mean, there's guys every year that maybe don't do much and maybe struggle in those first few games, but by the time we get to that 3rd or 4th game, when we used to have the 4th game, it all comes together and they're in their comfort zone and everything allows them, and now we're starting to see the true potential of a guy. So it's a double-edged sword. You've heard me say I want to bubble wrap guys up and just get to the first game, and there's a lot of truth to that. But at the same time, like, these things are getting through these experiences to really let us know what a guy can do for us this season and maybe further on down the road are really important.